Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Waverly Hills Sanatorium. The Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky is a former tuberculosis hospital that is said to be one of the most haunted places in the United States. The hospital was operational from 1910 to 1961 and housed thousands of patients suffering from tuberculosis during that time. The building's dark history, which includes reports of medical experiments, neglect, and mistreatment of patients, has led to numerous reports of paranormal activity. Visitors to the abandoned hospital have reported hearing strange noises, feeling cold spots, and even seeing ghostly apparitions, including the ghosts of former patients and nurses. The most famous ghostly sighting at Waverly Hills is that of a nurse who is said to have taken her own life in one of the hospital's rooms. Her ghost has been seen by many visitors and is said to be one of the most active spirits in the building. The sanatorium's eerie atmosphere and dark history continue to attract ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts from around the world. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Prince Edward Heights Mental Hospital. The Prince Edward Heights Mental Hospital, located in Prince Edward County in Ontario, was a psychiatric hospital that operated from 1913 to 1999. The hospital was known for its very controversial treatments and overcrowding, and there are many stories of patient mistreatment and harm. When the hospital closed, it left behind a dark and eerie legacy. The abandoned hospital has become a popular spot for urban explorers and paranormal investigators, with many reports of strange noises, unexplained occurrences, and ghostly apparitions. Some of the most commonly reported sightings include the ghostly figure of a former patient who is said to roam the halls, as well as the sound of footsteps, screams, which is horrifying, and other unexplained noises. Visitors to the hospital have reported feeling an overwhelming sense of sadness and despair, and many believe that the spirits of former patients still haunt the abandoned building today. In our number 8 spot today, we have Bannack. Bannack, Montana is a ghost town that was once a bustling gold mining community in the late 1800s. Today, however, the town is a popular destination for ghost hunters and urban explorers due to its reputation for being haunted. Visitors to Bannack have reported seeing ghostly apparitions, hearing unexplained noises, and feeling a very strong spiritual energy throughout the town. Some of the most commonly reported sightings include the ghostly figure of a former sheriff who was killed in the line of duty, as well as the ghost of a girl who is said to have died from illness in one of the town's homes. Others have reported feeling a strong sense of unease and fear, particularly in the town's abandoned schoolhouse. Very creepy. While the exact reason for Bannack's haunting remains a mystery, many believe that the town's violent past, which includes the numerous killings and deaths that occurred in its heyday, have left behind a lingering spiritual energy that continues to haunt the town today. In our number 7 spot today, we have the CPR Hospital. The abandoned CPR Hospital is located in Saskatchewan, here in Canada, my home province, and it's a different kind of CPR than you might be thinking. In its past life, this hospital was once a hospital for Canadian Pacific Railway workers in the early 1900s. The hospital closed its doors in the 1980s and has been abandoned ever since. Today, the hospital is a popular spot for ghost hunters and urban explorers, with many reports of strange occurrences and ghostly sightings. Visitors to the hospital have reported hearing strange noises, including the sound of footsteps and the disembodied voices of former patients and staff. Some have even reported seeing apparitions, including the ghostly figure of a former nurse who died in a tragic accident. The hospital's haunting history is thought to be linked to the many tragedies that occurred during its time as a working hospital. Whether or not the hospital is truly haunted remains up for debate, but its eerie atmosphere and mysterious past continue to draw visitors from far and wide. In our number 6 spot today, we have Bodie. Bodie, which is located in California, is a former mining town that is now a ghost town and state historic park. The town was established in 1859 and was the home to a thriving gold rush community until the early 1900s when the mines began to close. The town's isolation and very harsh living conditions made it a very difficult place to live, and it was eventually abandoned. The remaining buildings, which have been preserved in a state of quote arrested decay, make it a popular spot for tourists and ghost hunters alike. Visitors to Bodie have reported hearing strange noises, feeling cold spots, and even, of course, seeing a ghost or two. Some believe that the town's violent history, which includes shootouts and executions, has caused it to become haunted. Others believe that the spirits of former residents still roam the streets, unable to let go of their former lives. Bodie's haunting history and well-preserved buildings make it a fascinating but very eerie place to visit. In our number 5 spot today we have Val Jalbert. The abandoned village of Val Jalbert, located in Quebec, Canada, was once a thriving pulp mill town in the 1920s. However, after the mill closed in the 1940s, the town was abandoned and left to decay. Today, the village is a very popular spot for tourists and explorers, with many reports of strange occurrences and ghostly sightings. Visitors to Val Jalbert have reported feeling a sense of unease and hearing strange noises, including whispers and footsteps. I think that whispers is like the worst. No, voices is one thing, whispers is worse. There are also rumors of a ghostly figure that haunts the village's church, as well as other apparitions that have been spotted throughout the abandoned buildings. Many people believe that the town's tragic history, which includes a devastating fire and several deaths, has caused it to become haunted. The abandoned village of Val Jalbert is a fascinating and eerie place to visit, and its haunting history and ghostly tales continue to intrigue visitors from around the world. In our number 4 spot today we have Six Flags New Orleans. Six Flags New Orleans, of course located in Louisiana, was once a very popular theme park that closed its doors after Hurricane Katrina devastated the area in 2005. Since then, the park has been abandoned and left to decay, leading many to believe that it is haunted. Visitors to the park have reported hearing strange noises and seeing ghostly apparitions, including the ghost of a former employee who is said to have died on the property. There are also rumors of ghostly figures that can be seen walking through the abandoned park at night. While many of the park's attractions have been dismantled at this point, some of the structures still stand, including the abandoned roller coasters and the very creepy, dilapidated clown head that once served as the park's entrance. The park's haunting history and eerie atmosphere have made it a very popular destination for urban explorers and ghost hunters alike. However, visitors are warned that the property is unsafe and trespassing is strictly prohibited. In our number 3 spot today we have the Central Experimental Farm. Located in Ottawa, Ontario, this farm is a research facility that has been in operation since 1886. However, despite its scientific purpose, the farm has a reputation for being haunted. Visitors to the farm have reported seeing ghosts, hearing unexplained noises, and also feeling an eerie presence. Some of the most commonly reported sightings include the ghostly figure of a former farm worker who died on the property, as well as the ghost of a woman who is said to haunt the farm's historic farmhouse. There are also rumors of a ghostly horse-drawn carriage that can be seen driving through the farm's fields. While the exact reason for the farm's haunting remains unknown, many believe that the many tragedies that have occurred on the property, including accidents and deaths, have left behind a lingering spiritual energy. The Central Experimental Farm is a fascinating and eerie location, and its haunting history and the ghostly tales surrounding it continue to intrigue visitors from around the world. In our number 2 spot today we have Centralia. Located in Pennsylvania, this town is often referred to as one of the gateways to hell. That is due to the fire that spread in an underground coal mine underneath the town in 1962. The fire, which is believed to have been started by a trash fire that spread to the coal seam, has been burning for over 60 years and has caused the town to be evacuated due to toxic fumes and the risk of collapse. As the fire still blazes underground, it causes the smoke and poisonous gases to rise up from the ground, not only causing an eerie appearance, but also a very serious health hazard. The temperatures can be so hot in the area that one guy's backyard was measured at 626 degrees Fahrenheit. Sometimes the fire will also burn through supports underground, which in the end turns into a sinkhole. This has caused pets, wildlife, and residents to unsuspectingly get swallowed up into the hole. In 1984, the US government ordered a total evacuation of the town, but a handful of residents refused to leave and even went to court over the right to stay in the town for as long as they live. The abandoned buildings, cracked and buckled roads, and just eerie silence makes it a popular spot for urban explorers and paranormal enthusiasts. Some believe that the town's dark history combined with the ongoing fire has caused the area to become haunted. Finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the Eastern State Penitentiary. The Eastern State Penitentiary, located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, is known for its haunting history. The prison was operational for almost 150 years from 1829 until its closure in 1971, and it was once the home to some of the country's most notorious criminals, including Al Capone. The prison's imposing Gothic architecture and innovative design, which placed an emphasis on solitary confinement and rehabilitation, made it one of the most famous prisons of its time. However, its harsh conditions and notorious history also make it a popular spot for ghost hunters and people who love all things paranormal. Visitors have reported hearing strange noises, feeling cold spots, and even seeing ghosts, including the ghost of a guard who was killed by an inmate. Some even claim to have been touched or pushed by unseen forces. The prison's eerie atmosphere and dark history continue to fascinate as well as frighten visitors to this day. Coming in at number 10 is Fort Delaware. Fort Delaware, built in the 19th century to protect the ports of Wilmington and Philadelphia, served as a prison camp for Confederate prisoners of war during the Civil War. Almost 13,000 prisoners were held at one time, and around 33,000 were kept there in total over the course of the war. Now, conditions were rough, and around 2,500 men died at the fort. The fort was then abandoned towards the end of World War II and became a state park in 1951. Today, it is extremely haunted. It's rumored that throughout the parade grounds, Confederate spirits roam, still trying to escape from the fort. One of the most popular stories is of an attempted escape from a Confederate drummer boy. Legend has it he tried to fake his own death in order to be transported back across the river in a coffin. Waiting on him on the other side of the river were either sympathetic Union troops or fellow inmates who were supposed to free him from the coffin. Unfortunately, a shift changed SWAT personnel, and instead of being freed, the boy was buried alive. Now, there's also a photograph that was taken of a ghost there who's called the Blue Man, and this place is just filled with ghosts roaming around. Number 9. Poinsett Bridge. Poinsett Bridge is the oldest bridge in South Carolina and perhaps the entire southeastern United States. According to local folklore, Poinsett Bridge was built on the site of an old Indian burial ground dating back to when Cherokees were the only inhabitants of the mountains of the Carolinas, Georgia, and Tennessee. With this, it's no shock that this place is haunted. Other stories go that some of the men who worked to build Poinsett Bridge died during the bridge's construction due to a variety of illnesses, one of which was malaria. These men were then supposedly buried under and even within the bridge itself. Now, according to one legend, a slave was once hung under Poinsett Bridge and his ghost still haunts it, said resident Doris Davis. The bridge is haunted by those who helped build it, but got none of Joel Poinsett's glory. The ghosts of the slaves who died during construction sometimes reappear as lights in the surrounding woods and on the bridge itself after dusk and hover in mid-air for a few seconds and then vanish. Number 6. Emily's Bridge. Emily's Bridge in Stowe, Vermont is a 50-foot long bridge that's said to be the site of a young woman's death in the mid-1800s. According to legend, the woman, Emily, was supposed to meet her lover at the bridge to elope, but she ended up hanging herself from the rafters when he never showed up. Today, Emily's ghost is said to haunt the site, and instead of being full of sorrow, she's full of vengeance, as it's been reported that she claws at passing cars and even scratches the backs of pedestrians until they bleed. There are slightly less menacing spooks as well, like images of a white apparition and strange voices and footsteps coming from the tunnel. Number 5. Letchworth Village. Letchworth Village, located in New York, is a complex that used to be a mental institution from 1911 to 1996. Now, like most mental institutions, it closed after controversial experience on mental patients were condemned. The village, at the height of treatment in the 1960s, employed more than 10,000 locals who oversaw the patients on the grounds. Letchworth Village's reputation began its downward spiral in 1972 when journalist Geraldo Rivera published an expose on the cruel practices at Letchworth. Some things he revealed were, from the 1930s to 60s, Letchworth was a testing ground and then a frequent utilizer of electroconvulsive shock therapy, both as a treatment model and to see what effects it had on the brains of the feeble-minded morons, imbeciles, and idiots, to use the official medical terms of the times. Now, most of these patients didn't survive, or
they ended up far worse than they started. In the 1930s and 40s, trepanning and lobotomies, physical and chemical, were carried out in secret, often as a part of research studies. More than 800 people died as a result of mistreatment or experimentation, and they were buried in unmarked graves at the far end of the Letchworth property. Number 4. The Shanghai Tunnels. The Shanghai Tunnels in Portland were built by Chinese workers during the time when Chinatown was the center for trade business. The tunnel's original design was for transporting goods from cargo ships to the inner city. By using the tunnels, the ship's crew could avoid the hassle of inner city traffic. Now, the tunnels get their name for the practice of kidnapping and selling men as workers on ships headed to East Asia. Restless, agitated spirits of men who were drugged and trafficked in the city ports during the early 19th century are said to haunt the underground tunnels, through which they were reportedly sold. Legend has it that local saloons contained entrances to the tunnels, enabling swindlers to prey on unsuspecting patrons and bring them directly underground before they even knew what was going on. Now, deep within the tunnels, travelers have reported feeling goosebumps as if someone is watching them from the shadows. Many people report seeing an Asian man walking past them in the tunnels, and explorers name the spirit Sam and say that he is responsible for turning off the lights in the bar basements. Sam also likes to move things around in the tunnels as explorers walk by. Now, up until 2023, visitors could also take walking tours to learn more about the dark history of the tunnels, but the tours have ended indefinitely. Number 3. Northern State Mental Hospital. Northern State Mental Hospital in Washington operated from 1912 to 1976. Like countless other mental asylums of the time, grisly experiments were performed on patients, some of which have even been rumored to be part of the top secret government program MK Ultra. Now, patients were being subjected to treatments like insulin shock therapy, lobotomies, and electroshock therapy. Heavy sedation with powerful drugs was also a common form of treatment, but truly it was just to keep patients in line and submissive. Now, countless patients died here, and rarely were the bodies claimed by families, so their disposal was left to the state. According to hospital records, 1,487 bodies are buried on the grounds of the asylum. The Washington state legislature cut off funding to the asylum, and in 1976, Northern State officially closed its doors. Now, with so much suffering, death, and disregard for human life, the place is just straight up haunted. Most of those who were admitted weren't actually suffering from severe mental illness and were sent to the asylum to live out the rest of their lives under lock and key. Those who dare visit the asylum grounds report strange phenomena such as cold spots, the feeling of being watched, disembodied voices, and the feeling of being touched. Now, some have seen strange shadows darting around the graveyard. Now, the most commonly encountered entity is that of a young girl with a red ball and a man chasing after her. They've been seen running around the property, though some report the girl standing alone in the graveyard as well. And coming at number 1 is Summerwind Mansion. Summerwind Mansion in Wisconsin is believed to be one of the most haunted places in the US. This abandoned building is located on the shores of West Bay Lake in Vilas County on private land. The Lama were the owners of this mansion, and for 15 years of their occupancy, they experienced strange things. In the mid-1930s, as the family was busy dining, the door to the basement opened with a man appearing out of thin air. Limit shot at the spirit twice and chased him back into the cellar. The family later moved out, leaving the mansion empty until the 1970s when Arnold and Ginger Hinshaw purchased the building to turn it into a dream home. However, the paranormal activity chased the crew away, and the Hinshaws then took the renovation work into their own hands. Even then, the strange happenings did not stop. One night, Mary, Arnold's daughter, found a human skull and a handful of black hair in a hidden crawl space, which mysteriously disappeared when the police decided to investigate the house years later. The Hinshaws started behaving abnormally, and strange things still happen at that mansion, even after its destruction by lightning that occurred in 1988, leaving much of it completely destroyed.
Starting off this countdown, we have Six Flags in New Orleans. Six Flags is a huge American park corporation with parks all throughout the US, but sadly the one in New Orleans has been abandoned. The park opened in 2000 but only lasted a couple of years. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit the park and the property flooded. The whole park was submerged in 7 feet of water for about a month. The exposure to this water damaged a lot of rides, making them unsafe. There wasn't enough funding for all the repairs that they had to do, so the park was closed. Now it's only used as a film set. In fact, the film Deepwater Horizon and Jurassic World have both filmed scenes there. Moving on to number 9, we have the Land of Oz. Located Located in North Carolina, the Land of Oz was a park centered around the Wizard of Oz. It first opened in 1970 and featured a beautiful yellow brick road and had an emerald city, and even had one of the dresses Judy Garland wore in the film. However, the buzz surrounding this place quickly died down. Then in 1975 there was a fire at the park that destroyed the Emerald City, and then Judy Garland's dress was stolen. By 1980 the entire park was abandoned. Now you can only visit the park once a year as part of a Halloween attraction. In our 8th spot we have Jungle Habitat. Located in West Milford, New Jersey, the Jungle Habitat amusement park allowed guests to get up close and personal with the animals. You could do this by walking or driving through a specific area. The drive-through area was supposed to feel like you were on a safari adventure. This amusement park had 70 different species of animals from all around the world. However, there were constant rumors of animals escaping from the park or illegal poachings happening. This, of course, damaged its reputation. But that's not what caused the park to close. It said that Warner Bros. Wanted to make the park bigger, but the residents of the area were not too fond of this idea. In 1976, the park shut down and all the animals were rehomed. However, after the park was closed, frozen remains of several animals were found on the premises, making them wonder what went on there behind the scenes. Moving on at number 6 we have Bedrock City. Who here grew up watching the Flintstones? Man, that is such a classic cartoon. Back in the 70s, a Flintstones themed amusement park was opened in Williams, Arizona. It had rides such as a giant brontosaurus shaped slide, character statues, and a Flintstones themed diner. It also had a campground if you wanted to stay overnight. But recently the park changed owners, and well, the new owner had new plans for the park. The park was recently closed just last year, and now this owner plans to make it into a new attraction called Raptor Ranch. Can't lie, it sounds pretty cool. But for now, the park is abandoned and all that's left is a cutout of Wilma standing near the entrance. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Hobbiton. Hobbiton was an amusement park centering around J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. Now, you think that this park would be a huge success since the books were, but nope. It wasn't. Built in the 1970s, this attraction didn't have any rides or games, but instead it was more of like a nature walk, where you could just walk through scenes from the book. And I think that one of the reasons why this park failed was because people want rides and games, something to, like interact with. At this park, you would walk through the story of Bilbo Baggins, and each set had a voice box that would tell you what was going on in the scene that you were viewing. But it was a failed project and ended up closing in 2009. But if you pass by the area, you can still see a sculpture of Gandalf at the door of Bilbo Baggins' hobbit hole. Coming in at number 4, we have Chippewa Lake Amusement Park. This amusement park was operational for 100 years before closing down. It opened in 1878 and was the hotspot for family fun. In fact, its Ferris wheel was said to be the fastest Ferris wheel in America. I don't know if that's really an accomplishment though, like I can just feel the nausea just thinking about it. Sadly, the park closed down in 1978 because of low attendance. The park was left untouched for quite some time. Then in 2008, a fire destroyed many of the structures. The rest of the structures were demolished that same year. But people really need to stop burning down abandoned amusement parks. In our 3rd spot, we have Prehistoric Forest. This amusement park had everything you could ever ask for. They had a water slide, a waterfall, a smoking volcano, and dinosaurs. Lots and lots of dinosaurs. Built in 1963, this park was meant to mix fun with education. The park was divided into 3 areas. First, you had a safari train ride that would take you through the woods filled with 70 statues of dinosaurs and other prehistoric creatures. Then you had a walking tour led by a guide, and you would learn more about the creatures. Lastly, there was another train which took you through the land of the leprechaun. I know, kinda seems weird, like what do dinosaurs and leprechauns have in common? But this taught you legends from early Irish settlers of the area. The park even had a fossil digging pit, which is really cool. I would have loved that. And entry back in 1981 was only $2.75 for an adult and $1.75 for a kid. Man, I wish that's how cheap Disney's tickets were, because if that was the case, I'd be going like every month. Unfortunately, this park closed in 1999. In our second spot, we have Lincoln Park. And I'm not talking about the band here, or an amusement park based on the band. Lincoln Park was an amusement park located between New Bedford and Fall River in Massachusetts. In 1894, the Union Street Railway Company created Lincoln Park to connect Fall River to New Bedford. Lincoln Park was at the end of the trolley line and was originally created as a picnic park. It had picnic tables, a playground, and some grills to make your own food. Eventually, it transformed into an amusement park. It was originally named Midway Park or Westport Park, but was later changed to Lincoln Park. This park was known for its ride, the Comet, which was a 300-foot-long wooden roller coaster. But in 1986, a fatal accident occurred on this roller coaster, which kind of scared a lot of people, and they're like, is it really as safe as you claim it to be? Then in 1987, another accident occurred on another roller coaster, but thankfully this time no one was injured. But the park was closed in 1987. Then in the 1990s, a series of fires destroyed 90% of the park and the rides. What's with all these parks catching on fire? Like, seriously, Smokey the Bear is going to find out.
California, it's basically known as the epicenter for the American dream, the glitz and glam of Hollywood, the glorious sunshine, but there is a darker side to the Golden State. So today, we're looking at some of the creepiest abandoned places in California. We're starting off our trip to the Golden State with the Gates of Hell in Hacienda Heights. What is known as the Gates of Hell is this big barbed wire fence surrounding a piece of property that is rumored to have been a sanatorium back in the 40s. The story goes that this hospital had been shut down due to malpractice. And there are other stories that the building beyond this fence was the home of Satan worshippers who practiced all kinds of dark rituals on the property. As to how this rumor got started, well, beyond this ominous barbed wire fence is the back entrance to a building. Those few who have managed to sneak a glimpse of it have apparently seen all sorts of pentagrams and cultish symbols drawn all over it, and peeking inside the windows, you can supposedly see red stains covering the inside. Now, these could just be nothing more than made up stories, but many people claim to have this uneasy feeling that washes over them when they pass by this gate. There has to be some reason for that barbed wire keeping people out, or maybe it's there to keep something in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. By the way, we have awesome content coming your way on the daily. Alright, the notorious Bohemian Grove. Bohemian Grove is a private campground located in Monte Rio, California. It's known for hosting an annual invite-only retreat for members of the Bohemian Club, a private men's club that only allows highfalutin men from fields in politics, business, and the arts. Now, the area isn't always closed off to the public, just when this annual gathering takes place. And what goes on in these gatherings at Bohemian Grove is incredibly secretive. And there are very strict rules in place for members about maintaining this secrecy. The most famous event at Bohemian Grove is said to be the cremation of care ceremony, which is a symbolic ritual performed in front of a large owl-shaped statue. Nobody, other than the members, of course, know what this ritual entails. But you have a bunch of powerful people meeting in the middle of the woods in secret performing ceremonies. No surprise why most people on the outside find this incredibly suspect. I don't know. Let your mind go wild. Do they sacrifice a poor person every year and then drink their blood while dancing in the nude around the big owl statue? That's what I picture. I picture Wicker Man type stuff going on. Like, what needs to be so secret about a camping trip? I've never been roasting marshmallows and catching fish in the woods with my buddies and turned to them and been like, guys, This stays in the woods here. None of this gets out. Alright, the hidden city under Mount Shasta. Now, unlike everything else you'll see on this list, this place is only rumored to exist, but the story behind it is pretty fascinating. According to the legend, there's said to be this hidden underground city or a network of tunnels beneath the majestic Mount Shasta in Northern California. There are a few different versions of this legend, but the gist is that there's this hidden city inhabited by an advanced and enlightened civilization. Some say they're remnants of an ancient civilization, extraterrestrial beings, or even spiritually advanced beings known as Lemurians. Lemuria is a mythical lost continent in the Pacific, kinda in the same vein as Atlantis, and according to the legend, Lemurians found refuge in the tunnels beneath the mountain after their continent sank into the ocean. There have also been a good number of UFO sightings around Mount Shasta, and people who have claimed to actually encounter the underground city, like the prospector J.C. Brown, who claimed to discover the city back in 1904. He said he'd found a cave that sloped down 11 miles while prospecting for gold, and inside the cave he found an entire city filled with gold and artifacts like shields and weapons, even the remains of large mummified humanoids, some of which were 10 feet tall. Brown didn't come out with his story until years later, telling a man named John C. Root about his tale. John gathered a search team, but on the day the group was supposed to meet, J.C. Brown apparently didn't show up. Not only that though, he was never seen or heard from again. So I don't know, did he actually show up? And they went down there, they found the stuff, and then they were like, we want the gold to ourselves, and like took him out maybe? Who knows? Next on the list is Ano Nuevo Island. This place hasn't always been an island. It used to be connected to the mainland through a narrow strip of land that acted as a bridge, but water levels rose, eventually cutting it off. All that sits on this piece of land now are a handful of abandoned buildings and the residence, which used to be the home of a lighthouse keeper. The lighthouse is gone now, but the keeper is said to still linger in the afterlife anyway. The island is completely abandoned and off limits, now a protected wildlife preserve, home to seals and sea lions, but some say that on certain nights they've seen the windows of the old lighthouse keeper's home light up as if someone or something still looms over the island, keeping watch. In the LA suburb of Downey sits a fenced-off, boarded-up set of homes and buildings known as the Old LA County Poor Farm. The history of this place dates back to 1887, when the LA County Board of Supervisors decided to create a facility for the homeless. They bought 124 acres of farmland near Downey, functioned as a place for them to stay but also to work. It was a working farm with buildings to house residents, offices, and even common areas. Over the years, the farm expanded to around 400 acres by 1910 and produced a variety of crops and livestock. It was a self-sustaining operation, providing food for residents and selling all the excess produce for profit. Like, what an awesome idea. We need stuff like this today. Things eventually changed, of course, though. In 1915, a new superintendent took charge. The Great Depression also brought its challenges, with funding drying up and a tent city being constructed. During World War II, part of the place became an army base, and after the war, the facility evolved into a hospital, abandoning the farm aspect by the 50s. And then by the 80s, the aging hospital moved to a new facility across the street, leaving the old poor farm abandoned. It's now completely off limits to the public, surrounded by no trespassing signs and barbed wire fences. Creepy story though. In 2006, the military came to the area for a training exercise, and Marines stumbled upon a freezer containing tons of mummified body parts, likely from the hospital, but that's still really creepy. The Point Sur Lighthouse is surrounded by ghostly tales. It was constructed in 1889, helping to navigate vessels along the Big Sur coastline. One tale about this place is that the original lighthouse keeper continues to watch over the tower till this day. Future keepers have had the creepy experience of being all alone in the tower at night, only to hear labored footsteps ascending the stairs and the sounds of huffs and puffs coming from the stairs. But when they've called out to ask who's there or to go and look, the stairway is completely empty. There are also stories about a woman in a vintage dress wandering near the lighthouse, and some say she's the spirit of a woman who died in a shipwreck. Next on the list is the Lincoln Heights Jail. This was a pretty notorious jail. Big names like Al Capone used to be housed here. The jail has been around since 1931. It was originally constructed to hold about 625 prisoners, but by the 50s it was packing at about 2,800 folks. You can only imagine what the conditions were like in that place. And in the 50s and 60s, when LA was cracking down on LGBT activity, the place became known for something else. Cops were going after queer individuals, making arrests, and the prison had its own separate wing just for these prisoners. In 1965, the city decided to shut the facility down. It sat empty for ages, with people tossing around ideas for renovations, a trade school, a rooftop garden. In 1979, the Bilingual Foundation for the Arts moved in, but by 2014, it was abandoned yet again. Fast forward to 2017, the city wanted ideas to revive the place. The Lincoln Property Company and 15 Group got the nod to turn it into a Lincoln Heights Makers District. Public market, amphitheater, all that kind of jazz, but the place ended up being really tough to renovate. It was full of hazardous material, decay, and getting the place up to current environmental standards was tough. So the project was ultimately abandoned, and the place still sits empty to this day. Next up, we have the Sunken City. This spot is completely off limits to the public, although you probably wouldn't think it with how many people fart around in the place. The Sunken City is located in San Pedro and got its name in 1929 when a landslide caused a part of the coastline to plunge into the ocean. This left behind this series of concrete foundations, streets, and sidewalks that now sit below the cliffs. The area became popular for how eerie and surreal the landscape is. Even though it's been technically closed off to the public since '87, because of safety concerns, people were climbing the unstable cliffs and it became a liability. They're not supposed to go wandering around there, and the city has to put up fences and signs to make sure everyone gets the message. Trespassing can result in fines or even arrests, but people continue to sneak in. When I say people, I mean like young people. Let's be real. It looks beautiful though. There's palm trees, really cool looking graffiti. I get why people would want to check it out, but apparently it can be pretty dangerous. Forget the fines, people often get mugged here or worse. Let's talk about Murphy Ranch, sitting in the hills near Los Angeles. So back in the 30s, a couple with some pretty unconventional ideas decided to build a self-sufficient compound there. And by unconventional ideas, I mean they were incredibly anti-Semitic. They thought the world was headed for some major chaos, and seeing as World War II was looming, kinda was, so they built this compound, which ended up becoming something of a base for American Third Reich sympathizers during the Second World War. The compound had living quarters, a power station, and even a water storage system. It was a haven for them and other like-minded pricks, but the US government got wind of it and shut it down in 1941, the day after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. The remains of Murphy Ranch now sit completely abandoned and completely off limits. Old dilapidated buildings and graffiti-covered walls are all that remain. Yes, graffiti, people still do sneak in. Next on the list we have Alcatraz. This is one of the most notorious former prisons in the entire world. The amount of stories about this place is damn near endless, and it's said that some of the former prisoners still linger within the building till this day. Back in the 1850s, it started as a military setup, housing soldiers, but then in 1934, it switched gears and became a high-security prison, holding big-name crooks like Al Capone and George Machine Gun Kelly. Life on Alcatraz was no joke for inmates. They faced solitary confinement, hard labor, and punishment was incredibly tough. On top of that, the place was said to be this impossible area to escape, being out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by ice-cold water. Oddly enough, though, there were actually multiple escape attempts here, a whopping 14 to be exact. The most famous attempt was in 1962 when Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers disappeared into thin air. Some say they actually made it to shore, started new lives in secret, but others think they drowned in the frigid water. Others who tried weren't as lucky. Guards shot some or just caught him before they even got that far.
Starting us off at number 10 is Dawson, New Mexico. If any of the ghost towns on this list have a tragic past, it is definitely Dawson. The mining town was bought by the Phelps Dodge Corporation back in 1906, and they're the ones who really built up the town, you know, putting in homes, facilities like hospitals, stores, a cinema, even a golf course. The city had 10 mines, and the place was booming with a population of 9,000 until disaster struck not once but twice. In In 1913, canyon mine number 2 was shaken by an explosion in a neighboring town, and out of the 286 men who showed up to work that day, only 23 survived. Then, 10 years later, canyon number 1 had a mine car that derailed into timbers and the electric trolley cables sparked, igniting the coal dust. The majority of the 123 men that died that day were children of men from the previous disaster. Parts of the city's population moved after each explosion, and the demand for coal also declined quite quickly. By 1950, the last mine in Dawson was closed and the whole area was sold and the structures demolished. The town was just kinda left to rot. What's especially creepy about it though is the 400 white crosses in Dawson Cemetery that symbolize the miners who died. Imagine not knowing it was an abandoned city and just going there and seeing that. You'd be like, huh? Filling our number 7 slot is Mystic, South Dakota, and honestly I low-key just picked this one because of its name and that it reminded me of Mystic Falls from the Vampire Diaries. So Mystic is one of the many ghost towns located in the Black Hills mountain range, and Native Americans have quite an extended history with the area. It was actually called Sitting Bull before it was called Mystic. The city wasn't even really a city, it started off as a creekside camp in 1876 and somehow survived a really long time. Mystic's post office was built by 1885, 4 years later it had a railway line and a second one by 1906. The town started importing coal into the hills and exporting gold out of them. And the journey definitely wasn't easy. A bunch of floods happened, destroying a lot of their bridges and railway lines. The Great Depression screwed them royally, their sawmill burned down, but they just kept bouncing back, and we like that never give up energy. I don't have it, but I like it. By the end of the Second World War, everything was going to and the mill was too expensive to operate, and then people stopped traveling there, the sawmill was closed, and so was everything else, and finally the whole population was just gone. Now at number 6 is Rhyolite, Nevada, located right near the eastern part of the Death Valley National Park. This town got its start in 1905 as multiple mining camps just sprung up out of nowhere. It was the gold rush, so people were migrating to Rhyolite left, right, and center. The city had a lot to offer. It had resident hotels, an opera house and symphony, a hospital, a stock exchange, but most appealing of all, its infamous red light district. Girls from San Francisco would get employed by the shops there, which was kind of like a delicacy, if you will. At its peak, the town had about 3,500 to 5,000 people, but it went down as quickly as it went up. The earthquake of 1906 and financial panic of the next year made money scarce, and the mine stock value started crashing. They started closing down, which meant miners were also moving out of the town, and by 1920 the place was a ghost town. Coming in at number 5 is Kalapana, Hawaii. So this town is part of the Puna district of Hawaii, and fun fact, it was home to the infamous Star of the Sea painted church. Hawaii is such a volcanic cesspool, it literally has 15 out of the 129 that are part of the Hawaiian Emperor Seamount chain. In 1990, lava from the vent of Kilauea destroyed most of the town and its houses. Over 100 houses were buried in the lava flow, as well as Kalapana Gardens. The church was moved so as to not perish as well. The flow was so bad that even 2 neighboring towns were destroyed, and a new coastline was formed under the 50 feet of lava flow. By 2010, there was literally only 35 houses left, and now the town is closed because of new destructive lava vents. It just don't stop, do it. And number 4 is Virginia City, Montana. So this city was founded in 1863 and was initially called Varina after the only First Lady of the Confederate States, Varina Howell Davis. But the judge objected to that and called it Virginia City instead. It took a matter of weeks for the town to start booming, people coming from all over for the gold rush. But this particular region had no justice system or law enforcement, yet it had a lot of wealth. And what happens when a place has no rules and a lot of money? A lot of Criminal activity was at an all-time high. Road agents were killing and robbing people on the roads everywhere. They killed more than 100 people in a year. At its peak, it had 10,000 people, but of course when the gold ran out, so did the appeal of the city. By the 1940s, Virginia City had become a ghost town and was bought by Charles and Sue Bovee, who started maintaining the ruins, and by the 50s it was good for tourism. Fun fact, the frontier woman Calamity Jane lived there as well. Woohoo! Filling our number 3 slot is Shaniko, Oregon. Now plot twist, unlike nearly every single town on this list, Shaniko wasn't a mining town. It was for ranchers and was once called the wool capital of the world. People started making camps wherever they could find water, and it was actually initially called Cross Hollow and started properly booming at the start of the 20th century. The town was used as a transportation hub and was a center of sheep, wool, wheat, and cattle production. Their sales were like 3 and 4 million annually just for wool, which is incredible. At the start of the 1900s, there were 2 fires in the business district that ruined any extra hype about the city, and that's what jump-started it into decline. The place had been a ghost town since the 50s, but all the buildings are still there. The hotel, Sage Museum, Shaniko School, the ice cream shop Goldie's, and more. Now at number 2 is Kennecott, Alaska. So this was more of an abandoned mining camp than it was a huge city, but it was still kinda like a little town. Located next to Kennecott Glacier, a duo of prospectors traveled to the area in 1900 and found a bunch of malachite. The area had copper ores as well, and by the next year the Alaska Copper Company took root, and by 1905 things were going really well. There was a steamship line, a railway, a school, a hospital, tennis courts, and a bunch of mines. Between 1911 and 1938, Kennecott produced $200 million worth of iron ore. That is ridiculous. For a remote little town where the nearest bit of civilization is 60 miles away, that is a lot of money. By the end of the 30s, the place was deserted since mining profits had gone down, and honestly it was too far away from everything, and it just wasn't the vibe anymore. The population was 3, and those people served as the watchmen of Kennecott. And finally, at number 1 is Garnett, Montana. I was so pissed. I try not to repeat any states in this video and have it all be from different states, but alas, Montana is on here twice. Damn you America and your 50 states. The prospectors found the semi-precious red gems there and gold, which is where the city got its name from. The place was founded in the 1890s as a major commercial and residential area for mining and had around 1,000 people living there by 1898. It had 2 barbershops, 13 saloons, a school, 4 hotels, a doctor's office. It wasn't really that bad to live in at all. The city became abandoned after the gold ran out, but they would have left anyway since a huge fire broke out in 1912 and destroyed half the city. That part was never rebuilt again, which is super eerie. Just imagine burnt ruins for half the town and just historical old buildings on the other side. There has to be some symbolism in that, I'm sure of it. Garnett is now on the National Register of Historic Places and you can visit it, just don't move there.